Family betrayal cuts deeper than any knife. When your own flesh and blood turns against you, the pain becomes almost unbearable. My story is about trust destroyed and justice served in the most unexpected way. I stood frozen on my own front porch, my grocery bags growing heavy in my trembling arms. The key that had unlocked this door for 50 years wouldn't turn. I tried again, my arthritic fingers struggling with the familiar brass key that suddenly felt foreign in the lock. "Come on," I whispered, jiggling it harder as panic rose in my chest. My heart pounded against my ribs so hard I could hear it in my ears. This doesn't make sense. I set down the groceries and wiped my sweaty palms on my cardigan. Maybe I was using the wrong key? But no, this was the same key that had opened my home since Richard and I bought this place in 1973. The same key that had dangled from my keychain through 5 decades of life's ups and downs. The milk would spoil soon in the Alabama heat. I knocked, softly at first, then with more urgency. Surely this was just a mistake. Perhaps the lock had finally worn out after all these years. When the door finally swung open, my daughter Patricia stood there. But the warm smile I'd known all her life was gone. Instead, her lips curled into something cold and calculating, an expression I'd never seen before. "Mom," she said flatly, "I wasn't expecting you back so early." "Patricia? What's happening? My key doesn't work." My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. She stepped aside, letting me enter the home I'd scrubbed, painted, and filled with memories over 5 decades. But something felt different. The air had changed. Family photos had been moved. New curtains hung in the living room. "I had the locks changed yesterday," she said, watching my reaction carefully. "For security purposes." I set my groceries on the counter, noticing unfamiliar papers spread across my kitchen table. Mortgage documents. Sale contracts. My signature forged on several pages. "Security?" I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Patricia crossed her arms, abandoning any pretense of warmth. "Look, Mom. It's time we talk about what's happening. Thomas and I have decided it's best if you move to assisted living. Your memory isn't what it used to be." "My memory is just fine," I said, straightening my back. "This is my house." She laughed. Not the bell-like laugh I remembered from her childhood, but something harsh and dismissive. "Not anymore. You signed it over to me last month, remember? The paperwork's all legal." I never signed anything. The room seemed to tilt around me. "This is our house now," Patricia continued, gesturing to her boyfriend Dwayne, who appeared from my bedroom wearing Richard's old robe. "We're moving in this weekend. The realtor thinks we can get top dollar once we update a few things." My legs nearly gave out. 50 years of memories. Richard proposing by the fireplace, Thomas taking his first steps across the living room, birthday parties and Christmas mornings. All of it about to be sold off without my consent. "You can't do this," I whispered. "It's already done," she replied. "I've got power of attorney. You signed it after your fall. I'm just doing what's best for everyone." I saw it then, the greed that had consumed my daughter. The little girl I'd raised, comforted, and sacrificed for was gone. In her place stood a stranger wearing her face. "I think you should pack some things," she added, glancing at her watch. "The Sunny Pines retirement community is expecting you next week." I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. I walked to my bedroom, the room where I'd slept beside Richard for 42 years before cancer took him, and quietly closed the door. My hands shook as I sat on the edge of the bed. Tears threatened, but I pushed them back. This wasn't the time for crying. This was the time for thinking. For planning. Because what my daughter didn't realize was simple. I might be old, but I wasn't helpless. She thought she had beaten me, but the game had only just begun. Subscribe now to hear how I fought back against the ultimate betrayal. Trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Also download your ebook titled Suspense and Family Drama Short Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment. Richard proposed to me in 1973 with a simple gold band he'd saved 6 months to buy. He was 24, a postal worker with kind eyes and calloused hands. I was 22, working double shifts as a nurse's aide at Birmingham General. We weren't wealthy, but we were dreamers. One day, he'd whisper as we walked past houses we couldn't afford, "We'll have a place of our own. Just wait and see." For 3 years, we lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. The walls vibrated with the hum of washing machines, and our clothes always smelled faintly of detergent. But we saved. While friends bought new cars and took vacations, we put away every extra penny. I took overtime during holidays. Richard delivered mail through Alabama thunderstorms and sweltering summers. When the last Christmas bonus came in, we finally had enough for a down payment on a modest brick home on Maplewood Avenue. The realtor looked doubtful when we pulled up in our rusted Chevy, but his expression changed when Richard counted out the cash for the deposit. We moved in on April 18, 1976, the happiest day of my life until our children were born. Thomas arrived 2 years later, a serious boy with Richard's thoughtful gaze. Patricia followed 3 years after, all laughter and endless questions. Our home wasn't fancy, just 3 bedrooms and a yard with a magnolia tree, but it was ours. Those years flew by like pages in a book. Richard climbing onto the roof every December to hang Christmas lights. Me planting a vegetable garden that never quite thrived in the clay soil. Thomas building a treehouse that Patricia immediately claimed as her princess castle. Birthdays, graduations, arguments and reconciliations. All within these 4 walls. Thomas left for college in Atlanta and stayed there, building a successful accounting career. He married Helen, a kindergarten teacher, with a gentle smile. They visited for holidays, bringing their twins who filled the house with noise and energy that had been missing. Patricia studied locally but struggled to find her path. She'd start jobs with enthusiasm, receptionist, real estate assistant, retail manager, only to quit months later, claiming her bosses didn't appreciate her talents. Her first husband, Michael, lasted 2 years before leaving when their credit card debt became overwhelming. The second, Gerald, was gone in 18 months, taking their leased BMW with him. Through it all, Richard remained Patricia's champion. "She'll figure it out," he'd say, writing another check to cover her rent. Everyone blooms in their own time. But Richard never saw Patricia bloom. Lung cancer took him swiftly in 2013, just weeks after diagnosis. One day he was raking leaves, the next he could barely breathe. I held his hand in the hospital as he made me promise to look after our children, especially our Patty. "She needs more guidance," he whispered, his voice raspy from the tumor pressing against his windpipe. "Thomas will be fine, but watch over our girl." I promised. And for years, I tried to keep that promise. When Patricia couldn't make rent, I covered it. When her car was repossessed, I co-signed for another. When she called crying after maxing out credit cards on designer clothes and weekend trips to Nashville, I dipped into my savings, Richard's life insurance money, to bail her out. "It's the last time, Mom," she'd promise, her eyes filled with tears that dried remarkably quickly once the check was written. "I'm getting my life together now." But she never did. And with Richard gone, I started noticing things about my daughter I'd been blind to before. How her smile disappeared when she thought no one was looking. How her eyes calculated the value of objects rather than appreciating their beauty. How she compared her life to others and always found hers lacking. The first rail warning came last January. I slipped on an icy patch outside my back door and fractured my wrist. The pain was excruciating, a hot wire of agony shooting up my arm. Patricia drove me to the emergency room, fussing over me in front of the nurses. "My poor mother," she cooed, stroking my hair in the waiting room. "Don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything." During those weeks of recovery, she did take care of things. More things than I realized. She collected my mail. She paid my bills through my checking account. She organized my paperwork. And somewhere in that haze of pain medication and gratitude, I missed the signs. 6 weeks later, my cast removed but my strength not fully returned, Thomas called from Atlanta. "Mom," he said, his voice tight with concern. "Are you planning to put the house in Patricia's name?" The question felt like a splash of cold water. "What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that?" A heavy pause filled the line. "Because Patricia told me you were. She said you'd decided the house was too much for you and that you were signing it over to her while you moved somewhere smaller." My stomach clenched. "Thomas, I never said anything like that. This house is staying in my name until I'm gone, and then it's split between you both, just like your father wanted." That evening, I confronted Patricia in my kitchen. She was loading my dishwasher, a task she'd never volunteered for before my injury. "Did you tell Thomas I'm putting the house in your name?" I asked directly. Her hands didn't pause in their work. He misunderstood. "I just mentioned we'd discussed options for the future, that's all." "We never discussed options." She turned, her expression a perfect mask of concern. "Mom, you're getting older. We have to think about these things." "I'm 72, not 92, I said. "And this house stays in my name." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, Mom. Whatever you want." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something wasn't right. The daughter making dinner in my kitchen wasn't the same girl Richard and I had raised. Something had changed, or perhaps had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. February brought strange occurrences that at first seemed like innocent mistakes. My bank statement didn't arrive. When I called the bank, they informed me the mailing address had been changed to Patricia's apartment. "You authorized it last month," the clerk explained. "Your daughter brought in the form with your signature." I hadn't signed anything, but I let it slide, assuming it was a misunderstanding. Then other mail stopped arriving, utility bills, Medicare notices, letters from Thomas. Patricia had apparently filled out a mail forwarding form, claiming I was temporarily staying with her. One evening in March, I overheard Patricia on my phone in the kitchen, speaking in hushed tones. "The property has excellent potential," she was saying. "Once we update the kitchen and bathrooms, we could easily get 320, maybe 350. My blood ran cold. She was discussing selling my home, the home Richard and I had sacrificed everything to buy. "We need to move quickly though," she continued, unaware I was listening. "The market's hot, and I want to close before summer." I retreated to my bedroom, mind racing. That night, I searched my home office for my important papers. My will, deed, insurance policies. All missing from the fireproof box where I'd kept them for decades. The situation reached a breaking point on Palm Sunday. I returned from church, my Bible tucked under my arm, to find my key no longer worked in my front door. The familiar lock had been replaced with a shiny new deadbolt. I knocked, then pounded, but no one answered. Patricia's car wasn't in the driveway. With the afternoon sun beating down on my Sunday dress, I sat on my own porch steps, locked out of the home I'd lived in for nearly 50 years. Mrs. Hernandez, my neighbor of 30 years, noticed me sitting there and brought over a glass of iced tea. "Martha, are you okay?" she asked, concern etched in her face. "Patricia changed the locks," I said, embarrassment burning my cheeks. "I can't get in." Mrs. Hernandez's eyes widened. That doesn't sound right. Do you want to use my phone to call her? Patricia didn't answer. Nor did she answer my calls from Mrs. Hernandez's phone the next day. Or the day after. For 4 days, I slept in Mrs. Hernandez's spare room, wearing borrowed nightgowns and feeling a humiliation so deep it made my bones ache. On the 4th day, Thomas flew in from Atlanta. His face was grim as he picked me up from Mrs. Hernandez's house. "This ends today," he said, his voice tight with anger. "What Patricia's doing is elder abuse." We drove to Patricia's apartment, but she wasn't there. Thomas then took me to a locksmith who made us a new key based on my ID and property records. When we finally entered my home, what we found left me speechless. Furniture had been rearranged. New artwork hung on the walls. Richard's chair, the recliner where he'd spent his final months watching baseball games, was gone, replaced by a sleek leather lounger. Thomas methodically searched through the house until he found a stack of papers hidden in Patricia's old bedroom, now converted into what looked like a home office. Among credit card statements and shopping receipts was a document that made my hands tremble. Power of attorney. With my signature. Dated January 15th, 3 days after my fall, when I was still heavily medicated. "Mom," Thomas said quietly, "do you remember signing this?" I shook my head. She had me sign insurance forms in the hospital. Said it was for my medical claims. Thomas's jaw tightened. "This isn't an insurance form. This gives her complete control over your finances and property." We spent hours going through the papers. Patricia had been busy. Using the fraudulent power of attorney, she had redirected my Social Security payments to a new account, applied for a home equity loan against my house, and begun the process of listing the property with a realtor. "She can't sell the house without your consent," Thomas assured me. "Power of attorney doesn't work that way." But what happened next made my blood freeze. The following morning, while Thomas was showering, I stepped outside to get the newspaper. There, planted firmly in my front yard, was a red and white for sale sign. I stared at it in disbelief, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. A car pulled into my driveway, a shiny black sedan with a top broker magnetic sign on the door. A man in a crisp suit stepped out, holding a clipboard. "Mrs. Wilson?" he said with a practiced smile. "I'm Jeff Bradshaw from Premier Realty. I'm here for the initial walkthrough. Your daughter said you'd be expecting me." "My house isn't for sale," I said, my voice barely a whisper. His smile faltered. "Well, that's not what our paperwork shows. According to what your daughter submitted, you're moving to Sunny Pines Retirement Community next week. She said you were having memory issues and she's handling the transition for you." Thomas came outside, hair still damp from his shower. His expression darkened when he saw the realtor. "Who authorized this sale?" he demanded. "Patricia Wilson," the realtor replied, checking his clipboard. "She has power of attorney and all the signed documents. We're listed on an accelerated timeline, 45 days to close." Thomas sent the realtor away with a promise of legal action if they proceeded. Once the man left, I called Patricia, my hands shaking so badly I could hardly hold the phone. She answered on the first ring, her voice casual. "Hello. How could you?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. "This is my home, your father's home." "Mom," she sighed, as if speaking to a difficult child. "We've been over this. You can't take care of yourself anymore. The house is too big. You'll be happier at Sunny Pines." "I never agreed to sell my house." Her voice turned cold, all pretense gone. "It doesn't matter what you agreed to. The power of attorney gives me the right to make decisions for you. I've had you evaluated by a doctor who confirmed your cognitive decline. It's not your house anymore, Mom. It's mine to sell." I collapsed into Richard's chair. No, the new leather chair that had replaced his. The room spun around me as the full weight of Patricia's betrayal crashed down. This wasn't just about money. This was a calculated plan to strip me of everything. My home, my independence, my dignity. Thomas found me there, staring blankly at the wall. He gently took the phone and ended the call. "Mom," he said, kneeling before me. "This isn't over. We're going to fight this." Through my tears, I nodded. The shock was wearing off, replaced by something unexpected, a slow-burning anger that felt almost foreign in my chest. Patricia had underestimated me. She'd seen my age and assumed weakness. She'd counted on my love to blind me to her actions. That evening, Thomas and I met secretly with Ruth Cooper, an attorney who specialized in elder law. Her office was small but immaculate, with certificates covering one wall and family photos on her desk. "What Patricia's done is textbook elder financial abuse," Ruth said after reviewing our documents. "The power of attorney was obtained under duress when you were medicated. The doctor's evaluation was with someone you've never met. And she's used your funds without permission." "Can we stop her?" I asked. Ruth's smile was razor-sharp. "Mrs. Wilson, we can do more than stop her. We can make her regret the day she ever thought of taking your home." As Thomas and I drove back to my house, not Patricia's, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The tears had dried. The shock had passed. In their place was a resolve as solid as the foundation of the home Richard and I had worked so hard to build. I decided right then, this meant war. Ruth Cooper's law office became our war room. Thomas took a week off work, extending his stay indefinitely. Ruth, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with sharp eyes behind red-framed glasses, didn't mince words. "Patricia made 3 critical errors," she explained, spreading documents across her desk. "First, she obtained power of attorney while you were medicated. That's fraud. Second, she acted against your expressed wishes. That's breach of fiduciary duty. Third, she's attempting to profit personally. That's self-dealing." Hope flickered in my chest for the first time in weeks. "So we can stop her?" "We can," Ruth nodded, "but we need to be strategic. Patricia has already painted you as confused and incompetent to everyone who'll listen. We need to prove otherwise." For the next 4 days, we gathered evidence. The hospital records showing I was on heavy pain medication when I supposedly signed the power of attorney. Statements from Mrs. Hernandez and 3 other neighbors who'd witnessed me locked out of my own home. My bank records showing Patricia had withdrawn $14,500 from my savings without authorization. Thomas recovered text messages Patricia had sent him, boasting about her plans for upgrading Mom's outdated house, and how she'd finally get something out of all those years taking care of her. Each piece of evidence felt like reclaiming a small part of myself, my dignity. Ruth filed for an emergency injunction to halt the home sale and petitioned the court to revoke the fraudulent power of attorney. "What happens now?" I asked, after signing the last affidavit. "Now," Ruth said, closing her folder, "we wait for the court date. And you go home." "Home? But Patricia has legal access to your house until the court rules otherwise," Ruth finished. "Which is why you're going to go home and pretend everything is normal." Thomas objected immediately. "She can't live with Patricia after all this. It's not safe." Ruth held up her hand. "Patricia believes she's won. Let's keep it that way while we build our case. If Martha suddenly moves out or changes the locks again, Patricia will know something's coming. We need the element of surprise." I understood the strategy, even as my stomach knotted at the thought of facing Patricia every day, knowing what she'd done. But Ruth was right. The best way to fight back was from within. "I'll do it," I said firmly. "I can handle Patricia." Thomas looked unconvinced. Mom, are you sure? You can stay with Helen and me in Atlanta until the court date. I shook my head. No, Thomas. That house is mine. I'm not abandoning it, or letting Patricia think I'm giving up. Ruth gave me a digital voice recorder and showed me how to use my phone's camera to document everything. Record any conversations about the house or finances. Take pictures of any documents you find. And most importantly, act like nothing's wrong. That evening, Thomas drove me home, worry etched across his face. Call me anytime, day or night, he insisted, hugging me goodbye. I can be here in 4 hours if you need me. I watched his taillights disappear down Maplewood Avenue, straightened my shoulders, and walked back into my battlefield, my home. For a week, I lived in cautious solitude. Patricia appeared occasionally to check on me and bring groceries I didn't ask for. She spoke to me with exaggerated patience, as if I were a child. I smiled and thanked her, the recorder silently capturing every condescending word. Then came Thursday evening. I returned from choir practice, the one weekly activity Patricia still allowed me to attend, to find chaos in my driveway. A moving truck stood open, burly men carrying furniture inside rather than out. My front door was propped open, boxes stacked on the porch. When I stepped inside, my living room had been transformed. My comfortable, worn furniture was gone, replaced by sleek modern pieces I'd never seen. The family photos that had lined my mantel, Richard holding newborn Thomas, Patricia's graduation, our 40th anniversary, were packed in boxes labeled donate/trash. And there was Patricia, directing the movers like a general commanding troops. She wore designer jeans and a silky blouse that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Beside her stood Dwayne, tall, muscular, and at least 15 years her junior. He lounged against my kitchen doorway, scrolling through his phone with obvious boredom. Mom. Patricia called, her voice falsely bright. You're home early. What's happening? I asked, though the answer was painfully clear. We're moving in, she said simply. Dwayne and I decided it makes more sense to live here until the sale closes. That way, we can oversee the renovations. I stared at the strangers rearranging my home. Where are my things? Patricia waved dismissively. Most of it was outdated, Mom. We donated what was still usable. The rest. She shrugged. It was time for an upgrade. My wedding china. Richard's books. The cradle he'd built for Thomas that I'd kept for future grandchildren. All gone, discarded like garbage. I must have swayed slightly because Patricia gripped my arm. Are you okay? This is exactly why you need full-time care. You get overwhelmed so easily now. Dwayne finally looked up from his phone. Your room's still intact, Mrs. W. Patty said you could keep your bedroom stuff. How generous of them to leave me my own belongings in my own house. Patricia led me to the kitchen, now cluttered with expensive new appliances still in boxes. Mom, I need you to understand something. This transition can go smoothly, or it can be difficult. It's really up to you. The threat hung in the air between us. What do you mean? I asked, my voice steady despite the recorder weighing heavy in my pocket. I mean, she leaned closer, dropping the sweet act, that if you fight this or cause problems, things will get very unpleasant. But if you cooperate, you can stay here until the move to Sunny Pines. Your choice. In that moment, with her cold eyes boring into mine, I didn't recognize my own daughter. What had happened to the little girl who'd picked dandelions for me, who'd cried when her goldfish died, who'd once made me Mother's Day cards with glitter and heart stickers? But I knew what Ruth would advise. Play along. Gather evidence. Wait for the right moment. So I did something that visibly shocked Patricia. I smiled. All right, dear. If you think it's best. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion before her face relaxed into smug satisfaction. I knew you'd understand. It really is for the best, Mom. That night, locked in my bedroom, the one space Patricia had left relatively untouched, I cried into my pillow for the first time since Richard died. But these weren't just tears of grief. They were tears of determination. Over the next 8 weeks, I became the perfect, compliant mother. I cooked breakfast for Patricia and Dwayne. I smiled when real estate agents paraded through my home. I nodded agreeably when Patricia discussed memory care options at Sunny Pines. And every day, I gathered evidence. I photographed documents left carelessly on counters. I recorded conversations when Patricia thought I was napping. I catalogued every item removed or changed. When Patricia and Dwayne went out, I searched through their papers, finding bank statements showing my stolen funds being spent on luxury items. Once, Patricia nearly caught me photographing a document outlining the home renovations she planned, using money from my reverse mortgage. "What are you doing with my papers?" she demanded. I blinked innocently. "Just tidying up, dear. You know I like things neat." She snatched the papers away. "Don't touch my things again. Your memory isn't reliable." I apologized meekly, watching her store the papers in a locked drawer. That night, I found the key hidden in her makeup bag and made copies while she slept. Thomas called daily, his voice tight with worry. "Are you sure you're okay there, Mom? Ruth says we have enough evidence." "Not yet," I whispered into the phone from my closet. "I need to find the original power of attorney. I know it's here somewhere." 2 days later, I found it, hidden in a hollowed-out book in what used to be Richard's office. My signature was clearly forged, nothing like my actual handwriting. I photographed it immediately and sent it to Ruth. "This is exactly what we needed," she confirmed. "The court date is set for next Tuesday." For 8 weeks, I played the perfect victim. Until Tuesday morning arrived, bringing with it the sound of official knocking at my front door. The sharp, authoritative knock came at 7:15 a.m. I was already awake, dressed in my best blue suit, the one I'd worn to Richard's funeral. I'd been ready for hours, sitting at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold. Patricia stumbled from her bedroom in silk pajamas, hair disheveled. "Who the hell is knocking at this hour?" She yanked open the door to find 2 uniformed sheriff's deputies, their expressions professionally neutral. "Patricia Wilson?" the taller one asked. "Yes." Confusion flickered across her face. He extended an official-looking envelope. "You've been served with an emergency injunction and summons to appear in Jefferson County Court regarding case number 2023 CV 4587, Wilson vs. Wilson." Patricia stared at the envelope. "What is this?" "Legal documents, ma'am. You'll need to appear in court today at 2 p.m. As she stood frozen in the doorway, I walked calmly to stand beside her. The deputy nodded respectfully in my direction. "Mrs. Wilson, there's also an emergency protective order included. Ms. Wilson is not to remove any property from the premises or make any financial transactions on your behalf effective immediately." Patricia whirled to face me, the color draining from her face. "Mom? What did you do?" I took a sip from my fresh coffee mug, savoring the moment. "I protected what's mine." The stunned disbelief in her eyes was worth every day of humiliation I'd endured. After the deputies left, she tore open the envelope, scanning the legal language with growing horror. "You're suing me? Your own daughter?" Her voice rose hysterically. "After everything I've done for you?" "Everything you've done?" I repeated quietly. "You mean stealing my home? Forging my signature? Emptying my bank accounts?" I was taking care of you, she shrieked. You can't live alone anymore. You're not capable. I set down my mug. I've been perfectly capable of gathering evidence against you for 8 weeks. Capable enough to document every penny you stole, every lie you told, every right you violated. She looked like I'd slapped her. You've been spying on me? I've been protecting myself. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the voice recorder. Every conversation, every threat, every time you called me confused or incompetent. Dwayne appeared in the hallway, his expression wary. Patty? What's going on? Patricia stood speechless, the papers trembling in her hands. Then her shock transformed into ugly rage. You ungrateful old woman, she hissed. After all these years of looking after you, visiting when Thomas couldn't be bothered, listening to your endless stories about Dad. This is how you repay me. I felt a strange calm settle over me. Repay you? Like you repaid me for the $27,000 in loans you never returned? Or the car I co-signed for that got repossessed? Or the credit card bills I covered when you maxed out shopping in Nashville? She flinched at each example. That was different. You're right, I agreed. That was me helping my daughter. This, I gestured around at my invaded home, this is theft. The legal battle that followed lasted 12 grueling weeks. Patricia hired an expensive attorney who argued I'd willingly granted her power of attorney out of concern for my declining health. They produced the doctor's evaluation, conducted by a physician I'd never met, who had spent exactly 7 minutes with me before declaring me showing signs of cognitive impairment. Ruth systematically dismantled their case. She presented my complete medical records showing no history of cognitive issues. She called my regular doctor of 15 years who testified to my mental clarity. She produced statements from my church choir director, my bridge club members and neighbors, all confirming my independence and lucidity. Most damaging was the evidence I'd gathered while living with Patricia. Audio recordings of her discussing how to accelerate the sale before Mom catches on. Text messages to realtors stating I had already moved to Sunny Pines when I was still living in my home. Bank statements showing she'd spent my money on designer clothes, expensive restaurants, and a down payment on a new car. And finally, the forged power of attorney, alongside samples of my actual signature from 20 different documents dating back 5 years. Patricia grew increasingly desperate as the case unraveled. She claimed I had verbally agreed to everything. That she was acting out of love. That Thomas had manipulated me into turning against her. In a particularly low moment, she even suggested Richard would have wanted her to have the house since she was always his favorite. I didn't rise to the bait. I sat quietly through each hearing, dressed immaculately, answering questions clearly and calmly. I was determined to shatter the image of the confused, helpless old woman Patricia had tried to create. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with piercing eyes, listened to 3 months of testimony before delivering her ruling. The court finds clear and convincing evidence that Patricia Wilson obtained power of attorney through fraudulent means while Martha Wilson was under the influence of pain medication. Furthermore, Ms. Wilson violated her fiduciary duty by acting in her own interest rather than her mother's. Patricia gripped the table, knuckles white. The power of attorney is hereby revoked. All property transfers initiated under its authority are nullified. The home at 1423 Maplewood Avenue remains the sole property of Martha Wilson. I exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. Additionally, the judge continued, Patricia Wilson is ordered to return all funds withdrawn from Martha Wilson's accounts, totaling $42,867, plus interest. She is further ordered to return any personal property removed from the home, or its monetary equivalent. Patricia's face crumpled. Her attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but she shook her head, eyes fixed on me with naked hatred. "Mrs. Wilson," the judge addressed me directly, "do you wish to pursue criminal charges for elder abuse and fraud?" The courtroom fell silent. This was a question Ruth and I had discussed extensively. Criminal charges would mean a possible prison sentence for Patricia. Despite everything, the thought of my daughter in prison made my heart ache. "No, Your Honor," I said finally. "I believe the financial restitution is sufficient punishment." Patricia's shoulders sagged with visible relief. "Very well," the judge nodded. "This court also issues a restraining order preventing Patricia Wilson from entering the property at 1423 Maplewood Avenue or contacting Martha Wilson without prior court approval." Case dismissed. As people filed out of the courtroom, Patricia rushed toward me, her attorney trying unsuccessfully to hold her back. "You've ruined me," she cried. "Where am I supposed to get $40,000? You know I don't have it." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and felt a complex mixture of grief, disappointment, and resolve. "You'll figure it out," I said, echoing the words Richard had so often used about her. "Everyone blooms in their own time." Her face twisted. "You'll regret this, Mother. When you're all alone in that big empty house, you'll wish you'd let me help you." I met her gaze steadily. "No, baby. You will." But I had one final surprise waiting. One Patricia wouldn't discover until much later. The day after winning my case, I visited a different attorney, a estate specialist recommended by Ruth. There, I rewrote my will and established a living trust. The house Richard and I had worked so hard for would go to Thomas and his children after my passing. A small portion of my savings would be donated to a local charity supporting victims of elder abuse. Patricia's name appeared nowhere in the documents. She left Birmingham a month later, moving to Florida with Dwayne. She occasionally sends cards on holidays, not apologies, but subtle guilt trips about how I chose Thomas over her and threw away our relationship over money. I don't respond. Thomas visits more frequently now. His twins race through the house Richard built, adding new memories to these old walls. He installed security cameras and helped me update the legal protections on my property. Sometimes I catch him watching me with concern, as if expecting me to collapse from the ordeal. But I'm stronger than I look. My home is peaceful again. I tend my garden, host my bridge club, and sing in the choir. The house feels bigger without Patricia's shadow, but it's filled with something more important than physical presence: integrity, safety, peace. In quiet moments, I wonder where I went wrong with Patricia. Was it giving her too much, or not enough of the right things? Would Richard have been able to reach her in ways I couldn't? These questions have no answers, only the dull ache of what might have been. Family betrayal leaves wounds that never completely heal. Each time I pass Patricia's empty bedroom or find an old photograph of her childhood smile, I feel the echo of what we lost. Not just my savings or temporary peace of mind, but the sacred bond between mother and daughter. Yet this painful chapter taught me something precious. Age is not weakness, it's power. My 72 years gave me the wisdom to recognize deception, the patience to gather evidence methodically, and the courage to stand firm when it would have been easier to surrender. Trust, once broken, can rarely be fully restored. But that doesn't mean we should stop trusting altogether. It means we must balance love with wisdom, generosity with boundaries, forgiveness with accountability. Many assume the elderly are easy targets, confused, isolated, desperate for connection. Patricia certainly thought so. But she underestimated the quiet strength that comes from decades of overcoming life's challenges. She mistook my kindness for weakness, my patience for passivity. In the end, it wasn't lawyers or courts that truly saved my home. It was my refusal to be victimized. My unwillingness to surrender what Richard and I had built. My decision to fight back with intelligence rather than just anger. Sometimes the greatest power lies in letting others believe they've won, while you quietly prepare to reclaim what's yours. If you're facing betrayal from someone you love, remember, your age, your gentleness, your trust, these aren't flaws to be exploited. They're strengths that can become your greatest weapons when wielded with purpose. Subscribe now if you want to hear more stories of justice served in unexpected ways. Lastly, download your ebook titled Suspense and Family Drama Short Stories by clicking the link in the pinned comment.